There is the truth, and there is what is possible to respond to. The British were very cunning, and they went about the operation where they disenabled me and tortured me and basically committed an assassination, cruelly injuring, displacing, and ruining me. My best friend I have barely seen in 25 years. And because of her limitations, she's only been able to write to me 2 or 3 times. Where do they get off? I mean, if you look at it from simple humanitarian standpoint, you would see that um, when I was younger, I was like anybody else appreciative of John Lennon's music. Now, the evidence clearly shows that John Lennon was role playing, that he set up a story and with the help of a long planned Hollywood, for them, emergency lesson, they staged his death. But that's the truth. You're not allowed to say that. That's not what's possible to address. So I'm going to address some of the things that it's possible to address, which of course they've made impossible to halt. I mean, they're all amused by inflicting an existential dilemma. It's driven by what you could call the Brittany Griner principle, which is to say, Louis Lapham mongered that as a child I was induced to smoke pot by the hair establishment. So anything I missed in the letters of Gail Burston are my own doing because of my cobweb thinking as a result of um, the influence of John Lennon over our cultural affairs, which made marijuana use normal. Um, I didn't really think it was, but there was a lot of peer pressure in those days to just let it go. And it was mostly the Israelis who were sending me the letters. Well, I got used to that environment. But even though I should have been what the Russians also call a protected person, I was under 11 years old when I was first battered. Um, and strong substances, even pizza and carbonation, were much too strong for me at that age. Being battered was out of the blue. I had no comprehension of how that could be being done to me, and made me very shy. I was afraid of people. Well, although it's still possible to ask, how could they do what they did to someone like me? How could King Crimson's armed, brutal mafia do what they did to me? Torture me, castrate me, destroy the safety of my friends, incite terror towards loved ones, and sacrificially attack bystanders to deepen the intensity of isolation. Well, I have their own explanation. I have the explanation of the puppet show of the leading man, the talk show host, the dacoit general, who uses enough lookalikes and namesakes that it's virtually a signature. But of course, it's the sort of signature that he can evade. In other words, Ringo Starr made clear with the shrug, well, mentally ill people aren't treated very well by the British. So Let's explore the connotations of this offensive view that he could just, without trial, maraud over a poor old man for decades. Ripping me off was nothing to them. Tormenting me, inducing seizures, leaving me ruined neurologically. They say, well, Lenin was beloved to Donald Trump. Donald Trump has hordes of rich associates, some of whom are gay. The letters you're not allowed to say were CDC legacy, that they impugned the health and safety of our society's um, response to the AIDS epidemic, that John Lennon loved Ronald Reagan. They were the powerful and the important people, and that I was acting out my rejection in what illustrated to be a macabre lampoon of the existential dilemma of those at risk for HIV that Moon Unit Zappa wanted consummated with my murder. And this all makes perfect sense to their minds. And that's the final judgment of the Beatles' establishment. And it has reigned supreme territorially because of what you cannot say, which is that the whole thing was a strategy of Lennon's. If they were serious that AIDS was an attack, they would have arrested Gail Burstyn, but instead they used her effigy in advance planning on their very own record covers. Penis Gabriel's Lamb Lies Down on Broadway was making a laugh of the whole gesture of the situation that they planned to inflict. Now, you're not allowed to say that, so you have to go for the alternative view. The alternative view is the unstated claim that the mentally ill just aren't treated very well. Now, the reason they say, because of course they claim they have a very special reason why the mentally ill aren't being treated very well, is that the Wonder Kid could have saved John Lennon. When you examine that claim, they say that the books they were robbing from the Carnegie as compensation, and this very special script that they've been using for their point of departure and inspiration, has no relationship to the industry being Hollywood from which it came. The fact that it was sophisticated, the fact that adults to this hour cannot comprehend what it indicates, shows that it was extraordinarily obscure. In other words, nobody was willing to go to court and say, this cobweb thinking of a child who was slaughteringly attacked and given marijuana by adults when he was 10 years old can't be made comprehensible to a judge. Therefore, the child is to blame. It cannot be made comprehensible to a magistrate. Therefore, the child is to blame. And yet, this unspeakably mentally insane individual, Ringo Starr, is treated like a king, while claiming mentally ill people just aren't treated very well. It's extremely serious. It's a violation of all common decency. True, I could have been much more than I am. But when you look at what I attempted to be and what I was up against, I think a little bit of achievement shines through. I tried to warn people about the ecological emergency. I was laughed at, jeered, and shut down. I tried to capture the wisdom of my generation in a poetry book. To my gratification, women my age read it and said they could hear the singing behind the tears. It made them proud of our generation. I'm happy to be able to report that I accomplished something like that. Small achievements do make a difference, but I'm not happy to have to say that there's something very sinister going on with these eccentrics from the Crown of England.